Let's say it's 2007 and you're getting tired of your boring old Sony Ericsson W300 with its chunky, some might even say ugly design. You're ready to upgrade to something more sleek and modern, but you're too comfortable with the Sony Ericsson Walkman features, so you're not interested in a Motorola or a Samsung. The good news for you is, Sony Ericsson's got you covered with the beautiful W880, a phone that still has all the same software as a normal Sony Ericsson Walkman, but in a much more attractive package. The W880 has none of the rounded, bulbous, cheap-feeling plastic, and instead trades all that for a beautiful, slim body with a brushed metal front finish and subtle orange Walkman accents. Beautiful to look at, fits nicely in the hands and in the pocket, but practical, not quite. I'll talk about that later, but first let's turn it on because it's been too long since I've had the pleasure of using a Sony Ericsson Walkman device. One thing I have always appreciated about these is how incredibly consistent the software experience is across so many of these devices. From the home screen to the menu to the code memo app, everything is right where you'd expect it to be. Yes, it makes for a shorter video because there's not a whole lot of unique software to show here, but that was the beauty of this ecosystem. Sony Ericsson Walkman users could buy a new phone and immediately feel right at home because it's pretty much all the same stuff, including of course all the Walkman stuff you'd expect in a Walkman branded device. Now the W880 does have a couple of apps that I know not all Sony Ericsson devices included, so let's talk about those right quick. First is the world clock, which is a world clock, I know, not exactly noteworthy, but this world clock really goes the extra mile to visualize time zones in cities on an interactive 3D globe that you can rotate while exploring different time zones. Sure, this isn't a feature you'd buy the phone for, but come on, you've got to admit, it is pretty cool. Another app that could be useful is MusicMate, which describes itself as a musical utility with three main functions: metronome, guitar chords, and pitch. Metronome, well, it's a metronome. If you've ever used one, you already know how this works. Guitar chords teaches correct finger positions for playing chords on the guitar. And pitch simply lets you select and play a note on a keyboard to help you tune a musical instrument. I've got to admit, I'm not much of a musician, so I can't speak for the effectiveness of this app, but it seems like it could be beneficial to the right person. Of course, my all-time favorite app, Music DJ, is here on the W880, along with Photo DJ, a photo editing app, and Video DJ, a kind of early Windows Movie Maker style app that lets you create movies from photos and videos. No big deal for a Sony Ericsson device, but definitely not something you'd find included on many cell phones at the time. Of course, with all that content creation power, you'd expect this thing to have a pretty good camera, right? Well, not really. The W880's got a 2 megapixel shooter with no autofocus, no stabilization, nothing really to mask the fact that this is just a boring 2 megapixel camera that Sony Ericsson used in many of their phones. Don't get me wrong, in 2007 this would have been entirely acceptable and not at all below average. This camera easily beat the VGA cameras most people are still walking around with, so the camera gets a pass. This phone seems pretty great so far. Is there really anything to complain about here? Oh yeah, the keypad. If you haven't already noticed, there were some practicality sacrifices made in the name of beauty. The keypad on the W880 has the tiniest keys I have ever seen, and I can quite confidently say that they're the tiniest on any phone ever because if they were any thinner, they could probably cut your fingers. In my opinion, Sony Ericsson never had great keyboards on any of their phones, but I think this one wins first place for the worst keypad ever. Thanks to their tiny size and lack of resemblance to any keys in existence, simply dialing a number for a phone call is hard enough on this keypad. But try to compose a text message or play a game, all I can say is good luck. The rest of the buttons on this phone are similarly limited in size, and again, it's not for lack of room. They could have absolutely made these keys substantially larger, but that would have defeated the whole design. Now, while this phone may have not made a great texting machine, it certainly makes a great media player, which you would expect from a Walkman branded phone, but it's great to see here in such a beautiful device. Oh, and in case you're worried you might forget this phone has all that Walkman stuff, well don't worry because they make sure you don't forget, with 2 Walkman logos on the front, a little orange Walkman button on the side, a logo on the top, and one on the back. You've also got the orange Walkman theme and an animated wallpaper to remind you what this phone can do. And you know what? Sony had good reason to be proud of their Walkman software. At this point in time, their only real competition was Apple's iTunes, and before the iPhone took off, the Sony Ericsson Walkman phones were really the only cell phones that had integrated music service built right into their phones. Other music phones relied on confusing, expensive carrier services that were wildly inconsistent with what they offered. With the Walkman service, you could purchase music through the Walkman desktop software or website and easily sync them over the phone. Not to mention all of the on-device music services like Track ID, which could record and identify music tracks similar to how other music identification services like Shazam work. The Walkman app itself is pretty straightforward and feature-rich, with audio effects, visualizations, customizable skins, and of course, an equalizer. The W880 is missing a couple features from other Walkman branded phones, but the most important stuff is there, including of course those media control buttons. You'll need some extra accessories to make the best of this experience though. There's no headphone jack, so you'll have to use a proprietary Sony adapter because, well, Sony. And with only 16 megabytes of onboard storage, you'll probably also want to pick up one of Sony's proprietary M2 memory sticks, because again, Sony. There are also a bunch of other audio-centric accessories like FM transmitters and external speakers, which you might also want to buy, because the little speaker built into the W880 is pretty unimpressive. But once you've got all your accessories to make this thing a real music player and you've purchased some tracks to load onto it, you've got an awesome little music playing phone. Now, does this make up for the less than ideal user experience thanks to those cramped keys? Not really, unless you never plan on sending a text message, or you've got the tiniest fingers on the planet. But what I really think would have made this phone irresistible in 2007 is its visual departure from the standard ugly media phones of the time, but still preserving all of the features that made those phones so popular. Of course, the W880 wasn't all that popular, at least from what I can tell, but I feel like anyone who did pick one of these up would have been perfectly happy with it, as long as they knew what they were getting. Hate it or love it, there's no denying this phone was one of the slimmest, sleekest music phones from the Walkman line of phones. There's a famous design philosophy by American architect Louis Sullivan that says form follows function. This philosophy essentially states that the appearance and structure of a building or object should primarily relate to its intended function or purpose. The W880 takes that philosophy and defiantly flips it on its head, an item designed in a way where its appearance not only doesn't match its intended function, but possibly hinders it. Who really cares though? It's a beautiful MP3 player with a camera, it can play games, sort of, and it just also happens to make calls. Now by 2007, more and more media and smartphones were being introduced, and the W880 wasn't an exciting phone. It was so niche specific that unsurprisingly, no one really even knew it existed. But that's exactly why it's covered here on this channel, where I take a look at a lot of uncommon devices that didn't get the attention that they really deserved back in their day. I cover everything tech from the obscure to the most common, so if you liked this video, it would be awesome if you could give it a thumbs up and subscribe. As always, thanks so much for watching this video. I'll see you next time.